Hello, everyone. It is 4:05, so we are going to begin. Thank you so much for joining us today for this teach-in about SROs in our schools, policing and racial justice within our communities. We decided to host this teach-in because we wanted people to know the reasoning behind the demands while creating a space for learning about how SROs are connected to the bigger problem of racial justice and how it ties into policing. The Worthington School Board will be meeting on Monday, July 27th at 7:30 p.m. to discuss SROs and the school's current contracts with the Columbus and Worthington Police Department. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, the agenda. We will first go over some recent events that have been happening in Worthington, then go into our speaker panel, which will be moderated, but also have time for a brief Q&A with questions from the audience. We will then talk a little bit more about the petition and the demands and explain them slightly further than the letter itself did. We will close out with some powerful student speakers talking about their experiences in Worthington. We will take the last 5 minutes to talk about next steps, including a virtual protest on Sunday, as in tomorrow. Secondly, feel free to ask questions and comment in the YouTube live comment section. Lastly, if there are any technical difficulties, please let us know in the chat. Thank you so much to everyone for attending, and please thank our wonderful panelists for taking the time out of our day to join us, as well as our student speakers. We will now go into sharing recent events.
Over the past few months, many events have occurred, demands have been made, and actions have been taken for the Black Lives Matter movement. While these things have been happening nationwide and even beyond the US, we wanted to highlight some of the recent events taking place in Worthington. This is not an all-exhaustive list, and there is still much more work to be done. However, we are proud to see what our community has done together, united in doing what is right. On June 5th, our group created a letter containing demands calling for anti-racism within our school district and for the removal of SROs from Worthington schools. A petition was also created for these demands that has over 1,800 signatures at the moment. Throughout the months of June and July, there have been 8 organized protests, many of which were student-led within Worthington. These protests were held at Worthington Kilbourne High School, Thomas Worthington High School, 161 and High Street, along with many other smaller demonstrations. On June 22nd, the Worthington School Board passed a resolution in which they affirmed their commitment to be an anti-racist school district that is committed to social justice. An Instagram account, Dear Worthington, was created to bring light to the unaddressed issues of discrimination and racism within the Worthington School District, joining many other schools in the movement. A diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator was hired on July 10th. Again, there is still much more work to be done, but these are just steps that our community have already begun to take in within our community. Please keep the momentum going.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa and Molly, and we will continue to talk about more about what's going on in Worthington moving forward. So we'd now like to begin our panel. So if our panelists could please turn on your video and audio. That would be awesome. Thanks so much. And first of all, thank you so much to our incredible panelists for being here today. We all appreciate you taking the time out of your day to speak with us for this hour about issues of racial justice, both in Worthington and in the Columbus community. So thank you so much again. So we'll start off. Jean and I will be moderating this panel. I guess I have to introduce myself. I'm Nina. I'm a rising sophomore at Amherst College, and I graduated from Kilbourne High School in 2019. Jean, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jean Kim. I'm a rising sophomore at Georgetown University in DC, and I also graduated from Worthington Kilbourne in 2019.
Thank you so much. I guess we'll just start off by, again, introducing all of our panelists. So if each of you could just give us a wave or, something like one of those little, gestures that you can do on Zoom when we read your bio, that would be great. So everyone knows who's speaking here today. So I will start us off by introducing Morgan Harper. Morgan is a lawyer and most recently was a progressive candidate to represent Ohio's 3rd Congressional District. Previously, she was a vice president at Local Initiative Support Corporation, the nation's largest community development financial institution. Morgan also worked at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau as a senior advisor to the first director. She holds an M.P.A. from Princeton and a J.D. from Stanford Law School.
Next, I will be introducing Roaya Higazi. Roaya Higazi is a Sudanese American and Central Ohio native and is also a rising 4th-year student at The Ohio State University, studying city and regional planning and geography. She's a student advocate and was recently elected as the student body president of the undergraduate student government at Ohio State in April. Her advocacy revolves around institutional policymaking that centers the needs of marginalized students on college campuses. Most recently, her work has focused on COVID-19 financial and academic support, institutional support for survivors in the light of Title IX changes, and the demilitarization and divestment from the Columbus Police Department on the Ohio State campus.
Next, we'll be introducing Kwesi Lowe. Kwesi is a Columbus native and longtime advocate for social justice in his city. He is the former Ohio director for the League of Young Voters and most recently served as campaign staff for Morgan Harper for Congress. He holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Ohio State. Kwesi continues to fight for justice as he seeks to connect the Columbus movement to a larger national narrative.
Next, we'll be introducing Tracy Nájera. Dr. Tracy Nájera is the executive director of the Children's Defense Fund Ohio, a nonprofit child advocacy organization that has worked relentlessly for more than 40 years to ensure a level playing field for all Ohio's children. CDF Ohio champions policies and programs that lift children up out of poverty, protect them from abuse and neglect, and ensure their access to healthcare, quality education, and a moral and spiritual foundation.
Now I'll introduce Kanyinsola Oye. Kanyinsola Oye is a junior political science and history major, African studies minor from Columbus, Ohio, attending Howard University. Ms. Oye is a freelance writer. She's written for Teen Vogue and Vogue. With her writing, she explores the connection of politics to everyday livelihood. Through her writing, she implements her cultural background and how that plays a role in her future career goals. Kanyinsola is also the founder and executive director of an organization called the 50 Org, an organization that aims to eliminate the issue presented for marginalized college students on a national platform. Lastly, Ms. Oye is also the co-founder of an organization called She Can Make a Difference that teaches young girls the power of their beauty. Recently, she's visited her hometown, Lagos, Nigeria, to hold further a retreat regarding self-love to help young girls build their confidence. Currently, she's working on a campaign called CPD Out of CCS, calling for the removal of police surveillance in schools. She's a strong advocate for restorative justice for students, and she hopes through her writing and her organizing that she can influence young college students around the world to take a stand against injustice.
And finally, you'll be introducing Glennon Sweeney. Glennon is a senior research associate at the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity. She joined Kirwan in 2011 and in 2014 began leading the Institute's food justice work. Glennon specializes in understanding the historic and contemporary structural drivers of inequality at the metropolitan scale, with a focus on suburban space. A member of the Franklin County Local Food Council and the Worthington Community Relations Commission, Glennon is a graduate of Worthington High School, class of 2001, holds a bachelor's degree in geography and political science, a master's in city and regional planning, and is currently working on her PhD in city and regional planning from The Ohio State University.
So we'd now like to move on to questions, but before that, I just want to say to audience members watching, please feel free to leave questions in the YouTube comment section throughout this panel. We will have some time allotted at the end for audience questions. But first, we just have a question for everyone, and I was thinking we can kind of just go in the order that we introduced you for this one. So with this question, we just wanted to talk about how, since the murder of George Floyd and subsequent protests in May, we've seen many changes worldwide and in our own communities. And in Worthington, the movement has led to conversations between activists and our city council as well as our police department, about racism and police brutality in our suburban community. And we already saw Molly and Melissa talked about that earlier during this event. So in response to this movement, our Board of Education has hired a coordinator of diversity and equity and inclusion and released a resolution, as Melissa mentioned, pledging to fight against racism and for social justice. Many of us as college students from Worthington have returned to our hometown, and we found it pretty drastically changed. So can each of you sort of reflect a little bit on these changes that we're seeing in our communities? And also, if you'd like to speak to this question, what is it, do you think, about this moment that's led to such swift changes? And, in other words, kind of why now? That's our first question. So maybe we can start off with Morgan and just go through in the order that we introduced you.
Sure. Thanks, Mina, and thanks for all the Worthington students who organized the panel, and excited to be here with my fellow panelists. Well, I mean, I think one thing that's very unique about this moment is, that it's not a moment, that it keeps going. So just how sustained it's been in terms of the number of actions that keep happening. And then also the people who are making up those actions. So I think it's important to recognize that actually in certain communities, this activity and organizing has been going on for quite some time. But it might just be, a certain subset of the community or just Black folk who are out there protesting, and that we're seeing so many different types of people. That's one thing that I'm hearing from a lot of elders in the community is, wow, there are a lot of white people that are here too, and starting to speak out and show up and all of that. And then of course we have to contextualize like what's happening in different communities. So, I'm not a Worthington native, I grew up in Columbus, but I think a comparable context might be where I went to high school, which is Columbus Academy in Gahanna. That's a place where when you used to talk about race in my era, it was a lonely conversation and not something that the school was necessarily ready to engage with. But in response to George Floyd, in response to the protests, in response to people, I think, understanding that we're talking about something much larger than just police violence. We're also talking about systemic racism that's actually at every level of society, even if you think you've made it. That has opened up this window for a lot of institutions to reflect on their responsibility for eradicating racism from our country, which hasn't happened yet. And so, just taking that example of my home, school community in that way, Columbus Academy, they had their first anti-racism event ever, and having a head of school who was saying that we are in public against racism. That is, for that context, for that institution, that's a big deal. But, in terms of the drastic changes, and I'm sure others can speak to this too, who have been involved on the ground, I don't know that it is a drastic change actually in Columbus, at least in the responses that we've seen so far. So, we really have to be conscious of like what context we're talking about, what was the starting point. But one thing that seems across the board is just the diversity of people who are engaging and listening right now.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much for that answer. And yeah, I guess we can just continue in the order that we went. So maybe Roya, if you want to add to this.
Yeah, definitely. I think to kind of bounce off of what Morgan just said, the diversity of the people who are taking action is something that's really, really big, and something that I've seen a lot of at Ohio State. I haven't been here for too long, but from what I've seen, it's always certain students, the same groups who are focusing on this advocacy, and something that we've seen this summer is that it's incredibly widespread. The reasoning for that, I'm not too sure, but what the impact of it is that you are seeing levels of accountability in spaces on campus that you've never seen it before. So students are really not only applying the pressure, but they're expecting a lot more out of their leaders now. So a statement that says that we will continue to do more and we will take action is no longer enough. People are really looking at how our universities are investing into systems that continue to hurt students. Students are digging into their curriculum. Students are expecting more of their deans. Students are creating action plans within their colleges, within different units and departments on college campuses, within their student orgs. So there's really just this widespread level of accountability, whether how that accountability is being measured is very different. And I think that's up to marginalized students who are being impacted by it to decide. But I think it has been very different in the sense where you are seeing action in a lot of spaces on college campuses such as Ohio State that you probably haven't seen it there before. And I think that that's what's very unique about this moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think definitely that resonates with me too. I think in a lot of spaces I've seen, this movement is like the first thing people talk about. And it's kind of like you have to talk about it before anything else. So absolutely. Yeah. And Kwesi, if you wanted to add on.
Yeah, so I mean, we saw the police on people, making an outcry about police brutality with more police brutality. So I would say that's definitely going to get people's, it was unignorable, the fact that, again, police responded to a public outcry about police brutality with more police brutality. But at the same time, I kind of want to agree with what Morgan was saying about we haven't necessarily seen drastic. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah. I think it was breaking up a little.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay. So yeah, I wanted to. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about how much of what I said you heard. So I'll just pick up at the end of what I was saying as far as. Oh, okay. Apparently, I'm just all over the place. So what Morgan was as far as there not being enough, as much change as we kind of want to convince ourselves. We've seen a lot of maybe like statues coming down and then different like. Okay, am I good now? So we've seen like statues coming down. We've seen the Redskins want to change the name of the mascot, but we also haven't seen the type of changes that we were really asking. So I'm not sure if I'm having technical difficulties. So yeah, I'll just pass the mic.
Okay, we can see you now. At least I can. So yeah, I think it's working a little better. But if you wanted to say anything, or we can move on from that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so I swiped left or to push the tap to speak thing. I guess I'm kind of new with this. So I guess I'll just start at the top really quick. I'm sorry. So I was saying that there was a response to police brutality, an outcry about police brutality with more police brutality, and that's definitely going to get people's attention and going to, get some motivation, get people moving. It's definitely going to get people active. But I also wanted to just kind of piggyback off of what Morgan was saying about we've seen some changes. We've seen some changes that maybe want to pacify and just kind of quail the movement, but not necessarily given the bottom line demands that people are asking for.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding that in about response to police brutality with further police brutality. Yeah, thank you. So I guess our next person, if you want to address this, is Tracy.
Sure, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this panel. And I have to just add on to what the other panelists have said in terms of, this moment is really, I feel like it's the culmination of the past 60 years of people raising their voices, people without power. And it's so refreshing and so amazing to see people standing up, with the courage to do this, that maybe have not been involved in this type of movement in the past. And I think that is the part that has been, I think, the most inspiring for me, and that gives me the most hope. And then when I think about, the power of youth voice, youth voice has always, in every movement, has been that spark, right? That really has given, civil rights movements, other movements, the power and energy and the momentum, to make real change happen. And so I think that in this moment of this greater movement, seeing youth out in front, youth of all colors, out in front and demanding change, demanding action and questioning is incredibly powerful and is incredibly needed. Because they're the ones that can reimagine a future that many of us maybe can't because of where we are in our lives, right? So I think that that's been, for me personally, professionally, the greatest thing that I've seen. And my hope is that, you know, this movement, this energy has real action and change that's tangible. Because, you know, it's one thing for us to bang our fists on the table and say we want change. But it's quite another thing for, you know, us to be, you know, making those other changes within society through things like the census, through voter registration, running for office, you know, getting into those positions formally or informally of making that change happen and being there to implement it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks a lot. I think that was really informative for me as well. And if we want to go on to Kanyinsola.
Yeah, I think everything that's been said thus far, everyone made some great points. I think, like everyone said, this fight, this movement is really happening the way it is because of so many things combined that are causing it. And I think when I think of movements like this, I think of how everything is layered. And the first thing I think of is like, not only are we working with history of like, you know, people have been actively working around this for 60 years plus, but we also have things that are connected. So I was here during Trayvon Martin when it all took place. I remember the protesting as well. And also we are in the middle of a pandemic also as well, where the government is showing us time and time again that they not only are going to kill people in the streets in the middle of a pandemic, but they also don't care about Black and brown bodies, and they never will. And I think that's also a reason why it pushed people out into the streets, because for the first time, I think if you are a non-person of color, you see directly how the government doesn't care about you. And I think that really gave people context to show that when we do this fight is about class. It's obviously about race as well, but everything interconnects. And when we are fighting against a system of oppression, it's not, oh, I'm white, this doesn't have anything to do with me. Okay, yes, it does have something to do with you because inherently it's connected to how the government is treating you. So I think that's why it's so important. That's why people are out here, because it became obviously ridiculous that the government not only cares about you, but they're also going to use police brutality against you when you're protesting about police brutality. And they are refusing to understand the perspectives of individuals that have been advocating for this for years. I mean, I think that's why it's why now, and that's why it's continuing. As we've seen in Portland, people are out here protesting in the streets, and even in Columbus, Ohio specifically, and the experiences people are facing with the police officers goes to show this is why we have to continue advocating for it. And I think that's why it's so important. I think organizations and schools have begun saying things like, oh, we care about you, we listen, we want to remove these people from our schools. But honestly, it's all talk until you're about the action. And I think that's what genuinely is important to me. Like, we see for the first time in history, we see like big newspapers like Washington Post, New York Times talking about abolition. Like, who would have thought that was gonna happen? Like, who thought that was happening? So it's like slowly, like, we're progressively moving towards the left, which is great. But when we say these things, we actually have to put words behind our actions. And I think that's what like school boards are slowly having to learn, that you can't just say things and not provide what is being said. So I think that's what I think is really interesting about this time and this movement currently.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate your answer. And do we want to move on to Glennon?
Yeah, thanks. So I'll speak more directly to Worthington, since I think I am the only person who has that perspective. And I would point out also that the city and the school district in Worthington are two separate entities. So, the geography of the city is much smaller, the school district is much larger, and that makes a big difference. The constituencies, the residents are very different. Worthington is about 90.4% white. The school district is 70% something white. But in terms of the changes in the community itself, I see a lot of promise with what the school's talking about with the resolution. But I absolutely agree with what everyone is saying. That matters only for a minute until you back it up with the structural change. So I'm really excited about the structural changes that I'm expecting the school district to make because of the resolution that they passed. I'm thrilled about it. And, you know, and insofar as the city's moving a lot more slowly. But they're talking about some cool things. And so, you know, what I'm interested in is what they actually do, though. And in terms of the moment itself and why, I'm going to be real here. I worry that white people are in places like Worthington are only paying attention right now because we're not distracted. And when the virus, when we get when things open up more fully and our lives go back to, you know, normal, I worry, I wonder if places like Worthington, if people are going to continue to be out protesting and we're going to see as many white people engaging in this. And so that's something that I'm waiting and watching to see, quite frankly.
Awesome. Thank you, Glennon, and all the other speakers as well. Our next session actually kind of builds off of what Glennon was talking about, because not only are people asking why are protests happening now, but they're also asking why here. And as we are from Worthington, why in Worthington? People don't necessarily expect for protests to happen in mostly white suburbs like Worthington. And many feel that we don't need the changes that are necessarily being demanded. For instance, the people who are against the removal of SROs in Worthington argue that the conditions in mostly white suburbs like ours are unique compared to the cities. And so we have a different relationship with the police, which warrants different actions. And also some people are arguing that because there are more mass shootings in suburb areas, that we need SROs as protection towards that is one of the arguments that we've been hearing a lot, especially in response to our letter. So everyone, of course, is welcome to jump in, but we wanted to start with Glennon, who, as an alum of Worthington Schools, and you work specifically on these issues, how might you respond to these arguments? And more broadly, what do you think is our stake in this fight as a suburb?
So I think that, first of all, I think it's white people that have a different relationship with police, because police are about protecting whiteness and it's about white safety. And there's no place that better exemplifies that than the suburb. We think about how suburbs were formed and the creation of suburbs. We even think about like the idyllic image of a suburb, what we imagine in the American imaginary about suburbs. It's a white elitist space, middle class, maybe very wealthy, but it's a white place with white picket fences, right? And even suburbs that don't fit that, we qualify them when we call them suburbs, at least in academic literature and in the media. We call them declining suburbs or poor suburbs. We call them immigrant suburbs. We call them Black suburbs, but we qualify them. And so suburbs in many ways are about, and if we look at how suburbs were formed, they were formed through white flight. Pretty much all suburbs are formed out of white flight, and there are distinct phases that you can actually look at. And that flight is about protecting. So police in suburbs are even more, I would argue, about protecting whiteness, white property, white safety. And that is why it's even more important that as our suburbs become more diverse, and in our school district that is getting very diverse, that we rethink policing, because police are not there to protect everybody, you know, and if you have, you know, if there's something in the school that's deadly and dangerous to some of the children, you don't let it in the school building. And that is literally what police are to students of color in this country, and to people of color in general, particularly Black Americans. You know, and the history of our formation of suburbs is another reason for that, right? Those policies, restrictive covenants, racially restrictive covenants, zoning policies in suburbs, redlining policies that really harmed communities of color in our urban spaces. And then people with wealth in those spaces weren't able to buy into the suburbs, right? They weren't able to build that wealth. And so there are a lot of, and then our annexation policy even plays into this, and why we have a different city population than we do school district, right? But I'll let other people jump in as well.
Yeah, thank you for the response. Anyone is free, feel free to jump in this time.
Sure. I'll talk a little bit more generally about the school resource officer issues, more globally in Ohio. And, ultimately these policies have had an effect specifically on some of our suburban school districts. In 2018, legislation was passed that provided some grant dollars to school districts to hire school resource officers, which was in direct response to, some school shootings that were occurring, very deadly school shootings. What I would, challenge, and we've done this in the legislature in hearings on this specific issue in the past, is that having armed police officers never did anything to deter a school shooting. And I know that it's, a lot of people want to argue, but it is a deterrent. If you have someone armed there at the school protecting, the building, protecting the students, the teachers, that maybe you're less likely to have someone come in of the threat, with the threat of violence towards them. But there's really nothing in our history that would suggest that. So that's just number one. Number two, there is a focus on, perhaps what could be more helpful and more useful to many of our students and staff, in our buildings, is more behavioral health, mental health, supports and opportunities for development. And could that potentially be, more constructive to the actual student within the building? So, with the $18 million that were otherwise allocated for hiring, police officers with guns, could that be better used in other areas to support kids? Of course. As an organization, Children's Defense Fund, we support that. However, we do acknowledge that there are certain instances and certain, school buildings around the community or around the country and around the state, where having police officers in a school, perhaps, not necessarily outwardly brandishing a weapon, how that could be something very helpful in keeping students safe within the building, especially when you go into school buildings where they have high levels of, student violence or, things like that. Like, there's one school building, I know in Columbus where, if you're talking to a teacher, they'll tell you how many fights there had been that day, where, quite frankly, a school resource officer is very helpful in making sure that those students are being kept safe and separated, especially after a fight or after a confrontation starts. And also making sure teachers aren't in the middle of that because they're not there for that specific reason. However, just because you have a hammer doesn't mean everything is a nail, right? So I think having more measured and thought through strategies around what does school safety look like for our students is something that we need to really seriously look at. And also, just because a policy doesn't necessarily on its face say that it's racist, doesn't necessarily mean that the impact isn't. So that's another thing that we need to keep in mind. And I'll just stop right there.
Yeah, sorry, can I just tap in real quick on that notion?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's I think we have to kind of change the rhetoric around the idea that some SROs need to be in some schools, because when we talk about the idea of policing, we know it's negative. We know it doesn't have any good causes in schools. And when we talk about violence, inherently, what schools, institutions deem violence are places with more Black and brown people. So if there are more places with more Black and brown people, they are going to be the one under attack. I've talked to students specifically. I work directly to get cops out of Columbus public schools, and schools specifically that are seen as violent are being under attack. And I've heard students being put in chokeholds because they're running away from cops. I think that's completely unacceptable. And even if there's fights going on in the schools, how are we trying to figure out mentally what's going on with the students, what's directly happening for that aspect to take place? I think the idea to get rid of cops in suburban areas, but not to get rid of cops in predominantly violent areas is, I would say, it's kind of racist. But, you know, I would say like that concept is based on the idea that Black and brown kids are violent, or the idea that some schools, you know, are violent than others. And I feel like we have to really understand the concept that kids in general are going to do what they want to do, but you have to understand them. And that's why we advocate for more counselors in schools to understand that concept. I went to a school with 800 kids. We had one counselor. 800 kids, one counselor. That is unacceptable. And of course there's going to be fights. Of course there's going to be arguments because no one is talking to these students. No one is addressing this issue. And I think that's another topic that we have to really get into. And specifically for Columbus, you know, city schools. In 2017, when a young kid wanted to bring a gun to school, it wasn't the officers that were stopping it. It was the counselors. So that goes to show that SROs in any situation in any school district is not helpful, and it hurts our students. We really have to put the student first in any cases. And I think specifically in Worthington, I think this is another topic, you know, to go on about, because although Worthington is extremely, it's getting diverse over the years, although it is extremely suburban, I still feel like there's acts of violence against specific people of color in these spaces. So SROs should be removed from Worthington, but I also think we never be around the idea that there should be some SROs in some areas and some SROs in other areas. Because if we're going to talk about removing SROs, we need to talk about removing SROs completely. So we have to see it as one. Because I feel that notion, that language is very divisive, and people higher up will use that. I have people say that, like, well, if the students behave well enough, we'll remove SROs from the schools. No, you need to remove SROs, period, because they're violent and they are causing trauma on the students.
And I think I should.
And can I say really
quickly by saying that I don't believe that school resource officers are the solution to school safety in any situation. They don't have the training. They don't have the, and the training they do have is limited. And I agree. I think the mental health and behavioral health services, that those should be the things that we're investing in. I'd say if you have an adult with a gun, right, as a police officer, you know, being the one to have any role in discipline. Or any role
I'd say the elephant in the room is, the elephant in the room is just kind of the fact that the curriculum that these young people are receiving isn't addressing the issues that they're having, that they're facing when they go home. They're not going to school and learning something that they equate to something that's going to transform their life or make their life, allow them to be able to, pursue what they want in life. And I know that was my experience, and I know there's a lot of people that have that experience. So if we're not addressing that fundamental issue that young people aren't going to school to get something that they feel that they need, then you're going to continue to have chaos.
Thank you so much for that. I think absolutely to what Kanyinsola was saying too, I think this is why as part of our demands, in addition to, cutting our ties with the police department, we also are aiming to find ways that we can reinvest that funding, right, into counseling, into services relating to conflict resolution, right? Because we don't want teachers to be expected to break up fights, but we do want to have a mechanism for school safety in which there are staff and there are people in the building who can help students who need the help that they actually need, right? They can access the help they actually need without needing police intervention. So I think that really speaks to our demands, what everyone was talking about. And Tracy, I just wanted to pivot back to the work you do with equity in education overall, thinking about this more broadly. And after Tracy, anyone else can jump in on this too. Talking about the work that CDF Ohio does to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. And also because, our school district, our administration has talked a lot about wanting sufficient data to make decisions. I was wondering if you could also speak to that, the work that you do regarding data-driven equity.
Certainly. So for a number of years, CDF Ohio, we've looked at and we've really used data to look at inequities, especially in policies that have been implemented in schools. So in the past couple of years, we've really been focusing on two particular areas, chronic absenteeism and the out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. And both of those pieces disaggregated by race and ethnicity. Now, why is this important? Because we don't believe that chronic absenteeism is a function of, a young person just not wanting to go to school. We believe that that's a function of many other things going on within the school building, within that individual's neighborhood, or within their home. So getting down to, why is this occurring is really, really important, because chronic absenteeism can lead to all kinds of things. One of them being poor intervention. And if we're criminalizing things that are outside of that youth's control, there's a problem. So for many youth who are chronically absent, for example, there might be, housing insecure. They might be caring for younger siblings when they're sick. They might, be experiencing high levels of bullying or intimidation within the school building, or it could be an issue of transportation. So in any of those instances, you would hope that you would have a trusting adult within that school community that could, play an intervention type of role in any of those situations. And, having more mental and behavioral health professionals in the school would absolutely, could absolutely play that role. So that's just one piece of data that we're focusing on. The other is out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. And I think that this really ties in closely with the conversations around school resource officers, because in some school districts where you actually have, the police officer, and then the police officer has a mechanism for actually arresting that child within that school building in that setting, and to refer them to juvenile justice. There's a significant, there's obviously a huge issue here that needs to stop. The school building is not an arm of the juvenile justice system. So these are pieces that we've been, keeping an eye on, especially since 2018, when the legislation was passed around increasing funds for school resource officers, to see what impact that has on, juvenile justice referrals and out-of-school suspensions and expulsions. So these are pieces that, we don't have anything necessarily to report at this moment, but the data is really important. I know Glennon could probably share the same thing. We need to keep an eye on what this looks like, and, direct our resources in as much as possible to making sure that those youth are supported for success, and we're not diverting them right into a situation where we're limiting their opportunities.
Thank you, Tracy, for that. If anyone else wants to jump in on this question.
I don't have anything on this question specifically, but I guess the conversation is just making me think about something Glennon said in the opening about being concerned that the moment might pass. And I know when the protest got going, I was like, cool, this is good, because we need people engaged, and we need to have as much as attention to the issues as possible to have any hope of getting real action and tangible change coming out of it. And I also had the thought, for Central Ohio, that means that the movement has to go to the suburbs, because as has been described, the power of this region is actually held in the suburbs. So we can shout all we want at the State House, but the people that are coming downtown and making money and extracting resources and building the school systems in the suburbs, they're living around the city. And so I was happy to see, like efforts going on in Worthington. I attended the march that happened in Upper Arlington, the Anti-Racism Project in Bexley, because to me, that's the real moment of reckoning. And so when we think about what makes this time and movement different, I think it's radical honesty in a way, right? Because the jig is up in a lot of ways, right? So, we've been taught like, oh, if you just work hard, you're going to be okay. And it's like, nope, not true. And oh, well, we can't do more for you because the government just doesn't have resources. We have to balance budgets. It's like, oh, wait, but then COVID hit. And then there are all the resources in the world to do exactly what we decided were our priorities. And so now we have to come and kind of like feel that conclusion that actually, if we don't do anything about racism, it's just because we don't care about solving that problem. And is that really the country that we all buy into? And the fact is, there's a slice of people that is exactly the country that they buy into, and they're quite comfortable speaking about that, including elected officials when pressed, right? Or sometimes not pressed at all. But we also need to be honest about the fact that it's a lot of people that consider themselves to be liberal and progressive and democratic and all of these things that are also enabling these systems. And sometimes it just looks like, going home to Worthington or New Albany or wherever at the end of the day and not speaking out about anything, right? And that's kind of like benign harm. So it seems benign, but it actually is uplifting all of these systems of oppression. And so, that's what I think is really important right now, is that folks are coming with receipts and we're calling out like, well, we've done this strategy before. Like, look, I'm thinking of an example, like the SRO is a good example, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we are scared of mass shootings, therefore we need to invest in these officers in schools and that will solve for our fear of mass shootings. It's like, will it? Because the fear remains. Mass shootings continue to happen, traumatizing young people to grow up in systems around violence. And so did we actually address the real problem? And if not, again, we need that next level. So that's what this movement is demanding. It's like, nope, we've tried that before. Now what's actually going to get at the root cause of the problems that we're seeing that persist in our society and that are disproportionately impacting Black people?
Awesome. Well, thank you for those insights. I think that's really important to think about. And going off of like what you said, we kind of want to contextualize what we're doing here in Worthington, our Worthington campaign, with kind of the broader demands about policing, both in Columbus, nationally, in the city, and in other schools and universities. So if you could talk to us about what you've been doing in the city of Columbus, especially in terms of the demands that are being made, and kind of contextualize like where our movement is against SROs in the broader image of what we want to be doing in Columbus. So Morgan and Kwesi, either of you can start.
Oh, well, yeah, actually, I don't know. I feel like Kanyinsola is the best one to speak on like the CVD at a CCS movement. Do you want to start?
LOL. Okay. Yeah, sure. I could go ahead. I think that's a great question. I think when I look at Columbus, is extremely big. It has 55,000 plus students and high schools. And it's a huge thing, and I think that's really important to take into note. And when we created this organization dedicated to removing cops out of schools, it was really based on the fact that, we no longer wanted students to be traumatized like we were by the hands of cops in schools. And like I say all the time, I went to Columbus Alternative High School, and because it was a lottery school, it wasn't as policed. And even though I do have experience with cops, it wasn't as policed as so many other schools in my district. And what I say is that it's unacceptable that students are even being policed in general, because it doesn't make any sense. We see time and time again that they're not providing any resources, but instead they're making students scared to go to school. Our demands was really broken up into three parts. First thing that we asked was them to remove all SROs in schools, because we realized that not only were people experiencing violence while they were going out to protest, but while we were out protesting, we saw people that were 13, 14, 15 years old being pepper sprayed by police officers. And you can only imagine how you internalize that. And you have to go back to school and see the same exact people that were pepper spraying you in your schools. Not only does that cause fear, but now you are not doing so well in school because you have that extra fear on you and it's not a safe haven anymore. And not only do we have that, but we have teachers that also reaffirm the idea of policing and the need to have police officers in schools. So that was our first demand. Our second demand was to ask Columbus City Schools to really center their idea on Black Lives Matter. Because like we said, people can say all day, every day, Black Lives Matter, but what are you doing? What actions are you taking? If you're not possibly showing us that Black Lives Matter, if you're not willing to remove SROs, then this is all talk. And, the time is now to stop, just saying things, but to actually provide action. And then our third one specifically was to remove SROs from all forms of events. So because we have SROs at our graduation, we have them at after school events, we have them everywhere we go. And the thing is, when we talk about defunding, when we talk about removing these people from our systems or removing these people from our school, it's important to talk about that in ways of literally decreasing the amount of budget that they currently have. What we've noticed is that teachers don't even have money to get students things. The teachers are forced to buy students books, buy students materials, and they don't even have money for that. While SROs are making so much money daily, and the Columbus Police Department has a huge budget for what they are doing to our students, and that doesn't make sense. And like I've stated before, we had one counselor in a school with 800 students, and we see that time and time again with Columbus City Schools. Because we have so many schools, it's extremely hard and they're not allocating their money correctly. And it's unfortunate, and our students shouldn't have to go through that experience. And I think my experience alone, being a student organizer, being someone that lives in Columbus, is really what pushed me to stand against this issue. It's really what pushed me to help build a coalition of students that are currently advocating for this, because the time is now for change. And I might not see it in my generation directly, but I know that in the future, if someone does go to Columbus City Schools, that I want them to envision Columbus City Schools as a safe haven, not a place that's a war zone. Because currently, right now, this is a war zone. And when they go back to school, it will be a war zone. And Black and brown kids will be directly at risk of the violence that's going on. So I really think it's important that we center those ideas, those things that they are experiencing, because they are really at risk, especially after extreme violence that is going on in our city currently.
Yeah, and I really see, my role. It's funny. I feel like when you run a grassroots progressive campaign, you kind of get labeled as activists, and in some ways I am, I suppose, because I definitely show up to protests and speak out. But I really view my role as trying to uplift those who are doing the activism and organizing, and we have and use our platform to try to translate those demands into policy. Because that's ultimately how we will get tangible change, is by implementing the policies and putting pressure on elected officials to make the policy decisions that will change, funding priorities, for example. So I think that's been another interesting thing in this movement over the past couple of months, is we've been able to see a few examples of how, folks who are in different lanes able to collaborate and really collectively build more power to influence outcomes from elected officials and the political system at large.
Yeah, and one of the things, so we had a meeting with the mayor, maybe in the second week of the protest.
Mayor Columbus, right?
Yes, the mayor, Mayor Ginther. And he pretty much he laughed, he laughed at, he wasn't overtly laughing, but he kind of chuckled when we, made our demands. And we asked that he fire the chief, or the police chief, and that was a no-go, obviously. But essentially he kept saying that he was just there to listen, and which it was he was a code word for saying nothing was going to happen. So I think, it was myself and several other students. I know people were kind of keeping their identity, so I don't know if I'm going to mention anybody who was there. But what I recognized right then, and I think what we all kind of recognized, was the way the protests are happening is kind of missing the point. The powers benefit from what's happening. The mayor benefits, the police chief. So we're not going to ask them to change because they don't have incentive to change. Where the protests need to be aimed at is the heart of people like you and I, or people that, I guess you and I are organizers. We're organizers, so we're at the center of it. But people that are on the fringes are going to be the people who are maybe kind of tuned in, maybe haven't been to a protest, but have a family member who has been impacted by police violence. So those are the people that we really need to get to be more active, or to vote, to be active in not only in the protests but in general, to be able to like kind of reclaim our communities and to show a community cohesiveness, which is exactly what we're against when we talk about the police and elected officials and people in these positions that are protecting each other at our expense.
Thank you. And I think I cut out right when I was mentioning Roya's name, but Roya, if you could also talk to us about what you've been doing within OSU about all this.
Yeah, definitely. So a few days after the protests had began in Columbus, I released a letter to the university administration here at Ohio State, alongside the student body presidents for graduate and professional students, demanding that Ohio State sever its ties with the Columbus Police Department, as well as demilitarizing our university police, and some other demands in there as well. But that was generally the gist of it. The relationship in terms of jurisdiction with the Columbus Police in Ohio State is kind of interesting, but overall, the influence behind that was the fact that, similar to what other folks have said, is that there is no fixing the police. There is no fixing an institution that was made to be violent and to cause harm. So I would enter these tables and these spaces with university admin, and I'm like, all right, it's time to sever ties. And the response is immediately, how can we invest more money into a harmful institution and fix it and make people better and make people culturally competent? And all of these different solutions where, like someone had mentioned earlier, like the jig is up. Like at this point, like we recognize the fact that like there is no fixing a broken system. And for a lot of marginalized students, for myself, for Black students, we've already known this. But what was really interesting about this letter was the amount of support that I got from the community, from students, from alumni, from the Columbus community at large, not just the scope of Ohio State. Within the first week that we released this letter, we had over 21,000 signatures. So that's 21,000 people telling you that you can't fix a broken system. And it's something that was also very interesting because it was coming from student government. And if you're familiar with student government, it's a very passive body usually. So it was very interesting to see that there's different layers to this movement now. It's not just student activists that have been consistently shut out by university admin, but it's, I would say, the people that have a seat at the table. And I think that's also a big criticism that I've had over the past few weeks, is that you can have a seat at the table and it still doesn't mean anything if they don't have the intention of listening to you or working with you. So throughout my process of working with university administrators around divesting from Columbus Police, you kind of become a lot more aware of the politics of a higher education institution like Ohio State, the size, the reach, the fact that our board of trustees is appointed by the governor, and therefore we are running under the political realm of the state of Ohio. So cutting ties with something like the Columbus PD isn't easy, but also we're getting a lot of feedback such as like, okay, we recognize the harm that the Columbus police as well as university police cause on Black and brown students, but what if someone gets robbed? And what if there is sexual assault happening on campus? And all of these what ifs. And something that I've come to realize through those conversations is that those what ifs are inherently erasing the fact that those other instances are also things that Black and brown students are going through. So it's kind of this large scale erasure, and also thinking of the violence against Black and brown students on college campuses from police as singular instances, as every once in a while this is something that happens, and not recognize it to be something that's systemic, something that students are enduring every single day. So we were able to make some progress through those demands. We were able to get Ohio State to commit to some demilitarization steps, such as divesting from the 1033 program, which is a program that gives higher education institutions military grade equipment, because there's no reason for there to be a military tank on a college campus whatsoever. No matter anything that could happen, there's no reason to have that. And that just kind of adds to the violent culture that we continue to perpetuate. In terms of policing, that is still something that students are pushing for. In light of the demands that we released in June, a student group evolved out of that in July called Stop Policing OSU, who are continuing to push those demands alongside the student government leaders that had initially released it. So I think while this is still something, divesting from the CPD is still something that's in the works, I think it has been very significant in showing university administrators that people are starting to recognize what those gaslighting tactics are. People are starting to recognize that data is not enough. Ohio State is a very data-driven university. Like, everything they attribute it to, this is what the data says. But now you have Black and brown students coming and telling you, you can't use this data because this data is being compiled by the police. This data is being compiled by the Department of Public Safety. So you're really putting the university in a position where they're showing you that Black lives do not matter to them unless there is data to show it that that this harm is being caused. So kind of like some other folks said, it's really kind of exposing universities, specifically Ohio State, for blanket statements that are being released, promises of action. When students are calling on you to divest from police and you decide to make a task force instead, what does that say? I think something that has been really powerful about all of this is that all of it is coming to the surface. People that have never previously engaged in these institutional battles are starting to see what that gaslighting looks like, the different ways that student activists have always been diffused on college campuses, and it's really causing people that have never been previously engaged to start questioning their institutions and hold them accountable in the capacities that they can.
Thank you so much. And I think what you were discussing about having a seat at the table really aligns with our next question. So I'm going to move to that one, which is about, at this time, we've heard about the work that all of you are doing relating to racial justice, and all of you are kind of addressing different related issues on the issue of racial justice. So this is kind of a question just for everyone on this panel, whoever wants to jump in. In Worthington and nationally, as we know, there's been lots of debate about the best ways to go about making change. People have different ideas about which battles to fight, which goals we're trying to achieve, and which tactics to employ in our efforts to create a more just society. And so, some examples of the conversations people are having are between reform and abolition, or direct action versus, as Roya, you said, getting a seat at the table. So anyone who wants to jump in on this, I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on these debates, and also as a follow-up, kind of how you envision this movement going forward into the future.
Can I start this one? Yeah, I would definitely say that the system is too far gone, or it was started with, a lot of people have the history of the slave patrol being the origin of the police department. So, I think abolish is the only way to really think about it when, if we're talking about actually protecting people's lives who are, complaining about their lives being at risk or, in jeopardy. I know that would definitely open up a vacuum, and it's not a neat solution. And I also think that, you definitely need people at the table. You definitely need people at the table. But at the same time, I think it's both and kind of on that issue. You can't really have defund and abolish. Those are either or. But as far as this one, I would say it's kind of both and. We definitely need direct action as well as people, elected officials and people on the inside. We definitely need to vote for Morgan Harper. Not in this election, but. Yeah.
That would be a wasted vote in this election.
Does anyone else have thoughts on this question that you want to talk about?
You know, I think it's really interesting what some communities are doing around the country in terms of rethinking what community safety looks like. You know, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, you wouldn't see someone, you know, in what we would look at in the role of police, right? In a reimagined future, but perhaps it's, you know, just something very different where health and safety is at the forefront rather than, you know, responding to every situation with potential violence. So I really find these conversations that are going on, this is what needs to occur in terms of having those conversations and reimagining what it needs to be. And also thinking about, you know, right now, you know, to be a sworn officer in Ohio, I believe you just need a high school diploma or a GED and, you know, to go through the police academy or police academy training. So what could it look like differently, right? Could it look like perhaps, you know, perhaps to qualify, you have a background in maybe, you know, maybe social work, maybe mental health services, maybe behavioral health services, you know, but there's additional education there that with a focus on de-escalation and safety. But I think that those are, you know, those conversations need to continue. We need to keep having that. And there has to be action behind that as well.
So I'm for abolish. I mean, as Kwesi said, the roots, the history, the origin of policing is enslaved patrols. Policing is very much about protecting white supremacy and whiteness. It's our whole systemic racism is everywhere in the United States of America. It's not like there are some police departments that are immune to this. It's in every system, everywhere. You know, so we have to rethink it completely, as far as I'm concerned. And I actually absolutely agree with Kwesi as well in terms of it's a both and in terms of direct action and getting a seat at the table. And I think there are other roles as well. You know, I think that there are people that bridge between people who are on the front lines and really, you know, are perceived as those radicals, right? There are people who bridge and can work with policymakers as well and kind of connect folks. So I think that there are a lot of roles that are really important that people need to play. I think that protesting is critical. I think pressure is critical for structural change and for any kind of change in society. That pressure does, which is why I'm worried that white people are going to get distracted, quite frankly. Like, I worry what will happen when distraction comes back. You know, and I really challenge the school district to live into the resolution. I know that there are school board members watching this. I paid attention to who came on to the live feed. Resolution that you passed. You cannot be an anti-racist school district and have SROs. You cannot. You just cannot. And that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like I agree. If I could just jump in, I feel like it's contradictory for school districts to say they're anti-racist and have SROs. It's just not plausible. Like, you cannot do both of those things at the same time. And I think when we talk about a seat at the table, it's very important to come to the context of that's also another tactic that they use to distract people. Like, they give you a seat at the table, you feel important, you're like, yes, I'm here. You feel like your voice is being heard and your voice isn't being heard. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen to me exactly. So I want us, like, a seat at the table is great, but what good is a seat at the table if you can't bring your community along? It's useless. So I think when, like Kwesi said, we do need people on both sides, on both angles, working the policies, also people on the streets doing direct action. But if you are in there working the policies, you cannot become consumed by the politics of what this looks like. You have to be consumed by your community, by the voices of those that are fighting for this, because it's so easy in those spaces to be consumed by these politics that this is not changeable, like you can't do this. So that's something they say all the time. They say that you can't change these things, it's not possible. But we've seen with COVID, if they want something to happen, they'll make it happen. So it's possible, but you just have to remember when you get into these spaces, what does a seat at the table look like? Sometimes it's really not worth it. Sometimes it is. And what are you using your space for?
And I think we definitely need to keep that community pressure up. People, like, when we elect our grassroots officials, we need to be there. We need to continue to be holding them accountable, as well as being supportive, because, ultimately those seats are service seats, and there's a lot of people who are making a lot of money and being comfortable. And again, I will always go back to us as citizens. We allow
it. Yeah, I agree with, yeah, I think there's a role for everyone. And, just by nature, trying to build broad coalitions, I think that's important, and meeting people where they're at. For a lot of people, this is the first time they've ever really thought about systemic racism. So if summer 2020 is the first time you really thought about it, do I have the expectation that you're going to be leading a protest? Not necessarily, and that's cool, right? But I do always expect, and I think no matter what lane anyone's in, because it all accumulates to that pressure, we need people who are honest. We need people who are relentless in their advocacy for the people. And then you can be at home and on Facebook and just like spitting out honesty. And I'm like, we need you too. So it doesn't have to be always like a grand gesture. It's just the most important thing to me is that people are paying attention, that they are speaking truth to power, and that they continue to pay attention and add up to that larger picture of pressure and accountability.
To add on to that as well, I think something I've noticed is that this is the first time that a lot of people have ever thought about abolition. It's new to a lot of people, new to a lot of folks in the suburbs, to students on college campuses. They think that there's this gap, and they're incredibly terrified of what that gap is going to look like. But I think it's also very interesting that a lot of people are really open to the idea of abolition, are really starting to challenge themselves to reimagine what safety looks like, what community safety looks like. And it's really exciting to see on a college campus like Ohio State. However, when it comes to the different ways in which you are kind of trying to gather people and trying to build those coalitions, I speak from personal experience, I think having a seat at the table, as much as it is very powerful, it's also very dangerous when you are putting Black and Brown people at those tables, especially. And when I think of higher education, those tables were never made for Black and Brown people to be put there. And I think there's definitely a lot of emotional labor, a lot of free labor that goes into college students, Black faculty, Black staff, who are constantly doing anti-racism work and doing it oftentimes for free and doing it on top of their already existing role. So that's something that, at least within the spaces that I'm in, I've really been challenging folks to start picking up some weight, because I'm walking into meetings and people are asking me for evidence of police violence against students. People are asking me to collect student stories and trauma with police violence. And I'm like, one of us is getting paid here and it's not me. So it's really important to hold people accountable. School board members are elected. University administrators are one of the highest paid people in the city. There is no reason that they should not be listening to, or at least considering the students, the voices of students who are paying tuition to these very institutions. So I really think it's important that sometimes you just have to give the demands and bounds, and you have to expect that accountability for people. But along the way, I really think it's important for non-white folks to, I mean, not non-white, non-Black folks, excuse me, to really kind of assess what it looks like to pick up some of that weight off of Black leaders in a lot of these spaces, because they can become very dangerous very fast as well.
And you make a really good point also, that policing is not the only system that we need to completely rethink in our country. Like racism, systemic racism is everywhere. It's in our universities, it's in our education systems, it's in our housing policy. It's everywhere. We need to rethink so much. Sorry.
Thank you everyone for speaking on that topic, especially. I think it's also because we will be talking about moving forward up here in a couple of minutes. I think it's good to kind of have idea of like all the options of different things that people can do. And with that, we only have time really for one audience question, but we thought that this was a good one. It's asking if the SRO conversation is important, but they also want to hear more about what Kwesi was saying, and others can jump in as well, about thinking about the curriculum for students. Obviously, like in Worthington, the curriculum doesn't often reflect what students go home to every day and their lived reality. So if you want to make a couple comments on that.
I say that like we live in a society where honesty and openness isn't encouraged. We aren't genuine with each other, and we're probably pretty disingenuous with ourselves a lot of times. I don't think that any of this could be happening if that wasn't the case. So some of the things that the primary thing that a lot of these young people, that all of us need, that I'm cultivating myself as an adult, is challenging myself to be honest, to check in with my emotions. If I feel something like, oh, I'm upset, that doesn't mean I have to do anything. I feel upset, I can go sit down, breathe, and then I'll be fine, you know? So that's the very basis of it, just like emotional competency. If we start dealing with emotional competency, if people are more emotionally competent, I still didn't say it right, then we probably wouldn't need resource officers at the school, because people would be able to resolve their own conflicts, and more often. You would still have conflicts, but if people were checking in with themselves, then they would be able to check in with each other in a more authentic way.
This is why I'm so excited also about Worthington's anti-racism resolution, because you can't be an anti-racist school district if you don't decolonialize your curricula. But you need to completely review it, Worthington, if you want to live into your statement. It's why I'm so happy that you did that, because I believe that that's where you're going anyways.
Well, and I think the curriculum point is so important. Again, can't speak to Worthington specifically, but I'm here for whatever Glennon's saying as an alum. So I'm thinking of an example that came up in our campaign, reparations we had on our platform. And I engage in a lot of white spaces on that issue. And the first reaction would usually be like, ooh, that's a lot. Like, what are you talking about? Reparations, that was a long time ago, slavery, all this stuff. And I was like, sure, started with slavery, and slavery was a long time ago, sort of. But also we're talking about a lot of federal policies that actually inhibited the ability for Black people in this country to accumulate wealth. And those were happening in like 1970 something, or I don't know, the 2000s, right? But a lot of people have absolutely no idea. To Kwesi's point, to what we've been saying, it's like, you don't learn that history. So also as a Black person in this country, you're existing in these curriculums and school environments, and you're kind of just left with like, oh, well, wow, we just like have communities that are segregated, and we don't take care of our neighborhoods, and our schools aren't good. And, like that could be a narrative that is being imposed on you. And then you don't feel empowered to challenge the system or to demand more for yourself. And so to me, it's important that those types of curriculum changes happen where we actually learn accurate history. So not only that young Black people in this country are empowered to demand more and to have a vision for one, just an understanding of how some aspects of our community got to this place, but also that a lot of white people in this country understand how we got to this place, and will then be more, not only empathetic, but also more willing to make the policy changes that are necessary to achieve anything close to true justice or equality.
That means our teachers need to learn this history too, because most of them, or many of them likely probably don't know it. I'm talking to the school board members again, sorry.
And again, in fairness, I mean, how would you, unless you were someone that was thinking very critically about, well, how did we end up in this place? Or it's part of your professional, so like I have empathy in that way, right? It's like, no, we didn't learn this, right? And even our teachers who went through an educational system might not necessarily have learned that. And so, again, there is a subset of the population that is willfully ignorant for sure. But I think that by design, we have erased a lot of our history to enable the continuation of wealth accumulation by a certain subset of people. And again, like, we're in this moment of reckoning. So here's our chance to actually do something about it.
I'm curious to hear from the recent Worthington grads about what you thought of the curriculum and whether, equity components, existed and to what extent.
I think that Worthington definitely can do so much of a better job. I think a lot of my learning in terms of issues like race with like SROs, with gun violence, like stuff like that, when like March for Our Lives was happening, was all mostly just like me scrolling through social media by myself and seeing like trending hashtags, seeing like news stories that are happening. I feel like a lot of today's youth, you learn that you're missing out on information by like learning it somewhere else. Like I didn't realize that that like the civil rights movement was a lot more recent than I thought, and that those issues are still very much prevalent in like our society today. Because when I learned about it in history, it was like a little event that happened, like we went over it, it was finished, and it kind of just like was pushed away after that. And so knowing, I think in terms of like connecting the history to now and seeing how it relates, there's a lot of things that Worthington can definitely improve. I do want to say though that I think, especially as I moved up in my years in Worthington, a lot more teachers were open about topics like that. I remember I had the same English teacher freshman year as I did senior year. And we were talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, which I had really enjoyed freshman year. And reading again as a senior, I was very shocked by just how differently it like felt to me, and how there were a lot of very problematic things about that book that I did not catch as a freshman. And my teacher was so willing to have those conversations. And I think that that is a very good thing that is happening in Worthington, but something that I hope that every student is able to encounter, not just because they fortunately have the same amazing teacher for 2 years in their high school, in their time in high school.
Yeah, I would second that. I think I would absolutely agree. Just like everything that Jean was talking about, I agree with. But also, I would just say, like, on top of that, I think one thing I would just add is that when we do talk about other parts of the world, so often in the Worthington curriculum, it really ends up other parts of the world, but also like marginalized communities, people of color, especially Black people in the US. Like when we talk about these issues, it's always from the perspective of the people in power, right? It's always from internationally, it's always from the perspective of the colonizer. It's always from the perspective of, white folks with power in our government in the US. So I think like that was something that really frustrated me, was like sometimes when we tried to, curriculums claim to be global, but really, you only talk about another place that's not Europe when it's like, Europe, like Europe colonized it, right? So I think just to add on, I think that was something that frustrated me. And also I would say just the disconnect between, when we talk about history, like parts of the world that are not, Europe and the US, like people don't have an understanding either of the fact that these are people's histories, right? In their classroom, we talk about culture and like, oh, it's that culture, this culture is like this, that culture is like that. But there's not a lot of understanding in many of the classroom spaces that I was in Worthington, that these are histories of students, right? Like for me, for example, and for many others, like we're not, our ancestors were not from here. And we have to talk about the fact that this is like, these are real people, there's real historical context behind what we're discussing. And what we talk about affects our students, how we talk about, people of color, how we talk about other marginalized communities, how we talk about parts of the world that are not the US, and that affects students who are actually part of those communities and from those cultures and heritages. So yeah, I agree with Jean, and I just want to add that on in terms of my own experience. So yeah, I think we don't have any other audience questions. Jean, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, we're gonna just because of time, we're gonna have to shift over to Molly and Melissa, who are going to go through our explanation of demands. So we just want to thank all the panelists once again. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your wonderful responses and insights.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Oh, hi everyone. I am Molly Gladden. I graduated from Thomas Worthington in 2018, and I am a rising junior at the University of Cincinnati.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Yu, and I am a rising senior in Worthington Kilbourne High School and Linworth Alternative High School.
We're now going to go into some of the previous demands from the letter to Worthington School Board written by our group. I'm also going to share my screen, so bear with me just a second. It's going to be interesting looking. Oh no. Hold on. Okay. We'll get to see my 50,000 tabs that I have open. Okay. On Friday, June 5th, our group of 12 students / alum from Worthington Kilbourne, Thomas Worthington, and Linworth Alternative Program put out a public letter addressing the Worthington School Board demanding the immediate removal of SROs, amongst other demands. This letter was connected to a change.org petition, which in under 24 hours reached 500 signatures. Less than 72 hours later, it was at 1,398 signatures upon when it was sent to the school board on Monday, June 8th, prior to the same day school board meeting. The letter and petition, which as of July 24th has 1,825 signatures, demanded the following. 1. Worthington City Schools immediately ends its contracts with the Columbus and Worthington Police Departments and pulls the resource officers from our school. 2. The district publicly condemns the Columbus Police Department for its unchecked violence against protesters and acknowledges historical and continued injustice against the Black community in our city. 3. The Worthington School Board reallocates the approximately $100,000 per year it would save by divesting from the police departments towards several resources for students and faculty. First, we demand that the school system commit to hiring a diversity officer, highlight the diversity within our school system, and increase diversity among the faculty in the entire district. Next, we demand better mental health resources in our schools. We want access to professional help whenever we are faced with a crisis. Finally, we demand that all faculty are regularly trained in conflict resolution. Without police, faculty should be able to safely de-escalate any conflict that should arise, whether it be between two teachers, two students, or a student and a teacher. Worthington is a community, and as a community, we should be there for each other. In regards to the demands about the diversity officer, in the next section, Melissa is going to go into those details a little bit more, but before that, I do want to go into a little more about the general demands of removing the SROs from the schools. We ask that when signing the petition, people leave comments stating why they signed. These can be seen on the change.org petition. We also created a space for longer testimonies that people were comfortable anonymously sharing about police and SROs, and those anonymous testimonies can be found in the Worthington School Board public record. These demands were shared with Worthington in June, but we want to affirm that these demands are not a knee-jerk reaction. Black organizers, students, and community members across the country have been calling for the removal of police in schools since they were put in, calling for preventative measures and transformative models such as focusing on mental health and conflict resolution and prevention. Demands have also been made in other school districts, not only in Columbus City Schools, but in the suburbs as well. I want to take some time to quickly read off some facts and figures solely about cops in schools, and these facts derive from an M.P.A article as well as Dignity in Schools Resource Guide on Counselors Not Cops, where sources can be found. Firstly, however, relating directly to Columbus Police Department, it is important to acknowledge the early and ongoing protests and how CPD treated and continues to treat Columbus protesters, which includes Worthington students, parents, alumni, and community members. There is no Worthington exceptionalism when it comes to policing. Columbus police are in our schools and our own Worthington Police Department has a mutual aid obligation to the Columbus Police Department. We cannot remove ourselves from the police brutality that comes from the hands of the Columbus Police Department when we have direct ties to it. All right, so now for the facts. Again, these are from an M.P.A article as well as a Dignity in Schools resource guide, which will be sent in the chat at some point. Okay. Placing police and school resource officers into schools began in 1950 as a part of community policing, but became even more prevalent in the 90s after the Columbine Massacre in 1999, as well as movements to be tough on crime. From 1997 to 2007, the number of SROs increased by 47%, and the percentage of students who reported presence of security guards and/or assigned police officers at school increased from 54% in 1999 to 70% in 2013. In 2018, after the Parkland shooting and March for Our Lives, SROs were put into even more schools, including Thomas Worthington and Worthington Kilbourne High School. Now, 2/3 of high school students attend a school with a police officer, with even higher proportions for schools that have a larger POC student body. We know that police were placed in schools due to the fear of school shootings. However, the Justice Policy Institute has reported that there is no evidence that resource officers make a school safer, including at Parkland, in which they had an SRO. Meanwhile, there is an abundance of evidence that connects the presence of police in schools to the school-to-prison pipeline and other negative effects on communities of color. Having an SRO at school on at least a weekly basis increases the number of students who will be involved in the justice system, and the number of referrals for lower level offenses increases twofold. A study of 13 schools with an SRO and 15 without found that schools with an SRO had nearly 5 times the number of arrests for disorderly conduct as schools without an SRO. Though students of color do not misbehave more than white students, Black students are 2.3 times more likely to receive a referral to law enforcement or a school-related arrest as white students. Lastly, on average, per student spending on education at the state and local level decreased by 28%, while spending on corrections increased by 44%. Again, the sources for these facts can be found in the Dignity in Schools campaign, as well as the NPR article. I want to allow you all to sit with these facts and truly comprehend them. The presence of police in schools have many detrimental effects on students of color. The quick reading of facts only brushes the surface of the issue of policing in schools and the school-to-prison pipeline. We presented these demands to the board because students should feel safe everywhere, but especially in learning environments. Worthington is not exempt from national problems, no matter how far removed we attempt to put ourselves. Police in schools do not make schools safer, and they do not prevent school shootings. By the time a student decides to pick up a gun, it is already too late. As a matter of fact, after the Parkland shooting and the failure of SRO to intervene, a federal judge ruled that police nor any governmental agency has a duty to protect students. Time, effort, and money should be focused into harm prevention rather than harm reactions, as well as education both into a general sense, but especially with accurate history and mental health. Melissa is now going to go more into the demands relating to the diversity officer, which were included in a follow-up letter on June 21st.
In addition to sending in the written testimony from students and community members on June 22nd, we sent a follow-up letter to Worthington School Board in anticipation of their meeting on Monday, June 22nd. These demands went further in detail about the demands of hiring a diversity officer that we mentioned previously in the letter we released on June 5th. We demanded the following. We demanded that the person/people hired for the position identified as Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. We demanded that the students, including students who are people of color, are not just included but centered in the hiring process for this position. We demanded that the district invest sufficient time and money in hiring a well-paid person for this position. We demanded that the district consider hiring more than one person for this position to create a committee of people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds that represent the diversity within our district and within our schools. As mentioned previously, the district has hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator on July 10th. We hope that this coordinator will help to diversify the whitewash curriculum in the Worthington School District, provide better resources for students of color, and make Worthington truly an anti-racist district. We will continue to push for the demand that it is not just one person working on this initiative, but rather a committee of diverse individuals. All right, next. We will be taking student and alumni speakers that will speak about their experience as a student of color within Worthington, and or why they support our demands. Vincent, could you please turn on your camera and microphone?
Turn it on. It's not letting me get the video. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. So I'm Vincent Iguacan. I'm Thomas Worthington alum, 2018. So I decided I'm going to share a paper I wrote over a month ago called Black in Worthington. So I'm just going to start. I don't normally share a lot of things that are really personal. I've gone out of my way to really keep those things close to me because I never wanted to seem vulnerable. The last couple of years, I've experienced some very big, life-changing experiences that have made me do a lot of self-reflection. I hope that by reading this, people can take away something positive. Growing up in Worthington, Ohio my whole life, I've been very fortunate to live in a safe community with great people. I've always been seen as the shy, quiet, and passive kid who always has a smile on his face. The one thing that has always bothered me was the notion that I was the whitest Black guy in Worthington. This is a stigma that I've had put on me my entire life, because I didn't fit the stereotypical image of what a Black person is perceived to be. I played sports, I got good grades, I was never a confrontational person. I dressed in athletic clothing 90% of the time, and a majority of my friends were white. While this was said to me as a joke by many, I always saw it as a backhanded compliment. It was a micro insult that I let slide because I never wanted to take it personally. The idea that being successful, doing the right things automatically made me white was something that I strongly disagreed with. In my head, I thought, why can't a Black person achieve good things and be a great person without there being a narrative to it? To me, whether people intended to or not, they matched the content of my character to a specific race. I always thought that was wrong, but never wanted to speak out on it. I felt that my voice didn't matter to people. With that being said, the current status of our country has made me bring these personal issues to light and give me confidence in doing so. The police brutality, racism, and injustice that has been against the people of my color has been a predominant issue that our country has failed to acknowledge, and more so than not, ignore. I think about the lives of people like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the victims of the Charleston church shooting. The one thing they all had in common was they had their lives taken away from them unceremoniously, simply because of the color of their skin. Did I know any of these people personally? No, I didn't. But that never mattered to me because I knew that what happened to those people was wrong, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. For so long, we've seen this and tried to brush it off to the side because the powers that be want to claim that we've come a long way as a country and we're still an amazing country. This was an excuse that I always resented because despite how far we've come as a country in terms of how Blacks are treated, we still didn't truly want to address racism and police brutality as an issue. To me, seeing things like this happen to Blacks all over the country made me sick because I realized that this could easily happen to me, and my environment is what has protected me from that. That's why when I've wanted to speak out in the past about these things being wrong and wanting to bring change to this issue, I feared that people would bring me down and say, you live in Worthington, you'll be fine. Too many times I was truly seen as a white person to the eyes of my peers, but I knew that at the end of the day, if I got pulled over by a police officer, they'd see me for what I truly am, and that's a Black male. I've been grateful to never experience police brutality, but it didn't change the fact that I truly feared for my life every time I was involved with a police officer in any way because of the color of my skin. Being in Worthington all my life, I've understood that I'm in a position where I'm safe for the most part, while keeping in the back of my head that all it takes is one bad cop. My life could be taken because I'm Black. After the recent events in this country, I finally decided that it's time for me to use my platform and speak up on this issue. I believe it's time that we hold the people in power accountable to make real change to the killings of unarmed Black people. The reason this movement matters to me is because of the empathy, love, and compassion I have for everyone around me. Racism is a true disease in our country, and as someone who is fortunate enough to live in a safe community and be well educated, it's my duty to do the right thing and stand up for what I believe in. Oppression is something I still face every day, despite my environment. The idea that it doesn't affect you personally is why we've been pleading for change for so long. At the end of the day, this is not a political issue. This is a human rights issue, an issue that I plan on bringing positive change to, because this is about something way bigger than myself. It's about the people like George Floyd, who in his final minute screamed, "I can't breathe," and had his voice silenced because he wasn't seen as worthy. I want to be a catalyst of change. What bringing an end to racism and police brutality symbolizes to me is the ultimate apology to those lives that were lost in an act of hate because they couldn't stand up for themselves. It's my responsibility to be the voice of the voiceless. I simply ask that people can truly put themselves in other people's shoes and realize that this is something worth fighting for. I've never forgot where I came from and what my morals are. Treating others with fair and equal treatment, regardless of race, is what is truly in my heart. So I want that to be in all our hearts. I never in my wildest dreams thought that someone like me would be capable of bringing positive change to the world, but I realized that I'm more than capable of doing that. That's why I ask everyone to feel that they can bring positive change too. We live in a world of what ifs. I want to make that what if of ending racism disappear because it's something that has no place in this world. My life has been very good, and I'm so grateful for that. However, people have assumed because of my situation and my setting that I don't face racism in my life. I've had the racial trauma of thinking because my life has been good, I shouldn't be allowed to speak up on the poor treatment of people of my race and that my feelings are invalid. That is no longer the case because in 20 years from now, when we look back at all of this, I want to be able to say that I helped play a role in the right type of change. For the first time in my life, I'm able to say that I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm not the whitest Black guy in Worthington. That was never the case. I'm just Black, and I wouldn't have it any other way because I'm proud of being Black. I don't believe my characteristics should ever be associated with the color of my skin. I believe I have something you can't fake. I have grit. So I hope by reading this that we can all take a moment of self-reflection and truly do what is right, and that's accepting everyone. George Floyd couldn't breathe in his final moments on this earth. I want to make it my mission as long as I can breathe to end that type of treatment. So as a Black guy that grew up in Worthington, Ohio, I want to do what's right. The only question I have left for everyone is, do you?
Thank you so much, Vincent, for sharing your story. Maggie, would you like to speak now? Can you please unmute yourself and also show your video? Cool.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Maggie Enrique, and I will be a senior at Worthington Kilbourne next year. I want to start by saying thank you to our organizers for creating this opportunity for all of us to continue learning and creating a space where we can continue this conversation. To our speakers for their time and significant insight. I'm also very glad that curriculum came into the conversation because that is what I want to talk a bit more about. So I decided I want to speak today to share my perspective on a few different levels. As a member of our Worthington community, as a member of the Latino community, and as a student at WKHS. One of the biggest messages I've learned from the Black Lives Matter movement is the idea of being anti-racist by looking inward and addressing the biases we all have within ourselves. The idea of observing ourselves every day and questioning behavior within each one of us that can be harmful. This is applicable to Worthington as a community. Right now, as a district, we have the opportunity to look inward, to reflect on the way we function as a community, and acknowledge what we can do to create a safe space for every member within it. For the most part, policing is a reactive system. There is proactive policing, but as we have seen historically, this can be infected by racial bias, creating more issues than it resolves. By cutting our ties with the CPD as a district and choosing to fund other initiatives, we are choosing to be proactive in our own communities. We are choosing to try and prevent the same issues our resource officers are there to stop. By reallocating our funding, the district opens up a lot of opportunities to invest in their students. I will never know the fear and anxiety that my Black and brown peers experience in the presence of the police. As a white passing Latina, I know I'm relieved of many of the hardships they experience every day. Although what I can speak to is the significance of diversifying our classrooms and our faculty. I saw a student ask in the comments, why does it matter to have Black and brown faculty members and different narratives in our classrooms? Let me tell you why that matters. Second quarter of my freshman year in my honors English class, we were assigned to read A House on Mango Street by Sandra Cisneros. This book was not stated anywhere in the curriculum. It was not a required reading. Rather, it was chosen by my teacher. I will never forget what it felt like to have my whole class be required to be immersed in my own culture. It was the first time I had read a novel solely focused on a Latino narrative, and one that made me proud too. I felt seen, and it was the first time I realized that I felt invisible in the first place. erased by colorism, but also by our extremely whitewashed and colonized curriculum, especially in our history and English classes. Another impactful moment for me was this past year. First semester of my junior year was the first time I had a Latina teacher. It made me ecstatic. She was passionate and unafraid of acknowledging real issues, and the one time a student in my class used the phrase "beaner" as an innocent joke, the situation wasn't swept under the rug. Oddly enough, she acknowledged it. She explained why the word was offensive, and she taught the class why it was inappropriate to say. I had never experienced having an advocate in the classroom before. Some students will go their whole high school career without seeing a teacher that reflects them, and some students will miss out on the chance to hear from diverse perspectives. I'm lucky to have felt represented in the classroom in these instances. I also want to highlight and mention the fact that my exposure to these perspectives were increased by the fact that I was taking honors and AP classes, and we need these perspectives in all classes. We need teachers who will stand up for what is right and be anti-racist in their own classrooms, in all classes, regardless of the level of coursework or the rigor. I'm here to tell you we cannot rely on luck and chance to once in a while bring us diverse and unique teachers and perspectives. We need to be actively seeking out these resources and opportunities in order for our community to grow. I'm here to ask that our district take this time in our nation to reflect on ways that we can improve our own communities and to consider narratives that have been left out of our classrooms and to think about ways to spend our money in order to bring our communities closer together.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for sharing your story and insight. John, could you please unmute yourself and show your video?
Yeah. So can you guys see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
All right. So I made a couple points just so I can keep myself on track. I'm John Chungin, JT, same person, graduating class of 2019 from Thomas. I study neuroscience at Johns Hopkins now. And so I want to start with just one point that was brought up about the curriculum. And personally, from the Thomas standpoint, I don't think we learned anything that, one, teaches us about real life, and two, that teaches us about pertinent history and history that we need to understand to make a change. And what I mean by that is, things like, the ghettos, we barely even, covered, barely touched on, and the complexity of it, we didn't even really get into. And things like Section 8, things like redlining, all that, not even touch. And to me, that's a failure on the school system. I get there's a curriculum you're trying to pass so that we can pass these tests so we can make your school look good. But at the same time, give us the knowledge, give us the power so that we can actually do something and change the world. That's what it's all about, and make the world a better place. And so that's all I'll say on the curriculum. And I'll go into the SROs. And so for me, as a kid, going to school at Thomas as a Black man, and when I walk in the building, my only goal should be educating myself to grow as a person, to learn more, so I can, continue my steps, whether it be college, vocational school, whatever. And that means also, making the people around me better. But that can't happen if I have a shadow behind my back, because the SRO, people have to understand it's all about perspective. The SRO represents the man, the system that has always kept Black people at a disadvantage. People of color has oppressed them and kept them under. And so for us to, just keep that in our schools, meanwhile knowing our Black kids are there to try to get an education. Furthermore, our government forces the kids to be there. It's supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be the one place maybe some people escape to. It's supposed to be this and that. But they force kids to go to school, and they put something that they know the kids are afraid of. And it's a no-brainer. People know this from the start. Black kids, Black men, Black women are afraid of the cops, and specifically Black men. And it's almost something that's, ingrained from the time, you start realizing how the world works. And that's unfortunate. And I don't want it to be that case, but as of now, that's where we're at. And we have to understand, if that's where we're at, that's what we have to deal with. So, there may be a time, maybe later on in life, maybe long down the road, maybe that we can reevaluate the situation about the SROs. But as of now, we have to understand that Black people are afraid of the cops, and to put the cops in a place that you claim is safe and a place that we're mandated to go to is simply, it's unethical and it's unjust. And furthermore, people always want to say SROs are there to prevent school shootings, this or that. But, it's another elephant in the room is if we want to prevent school shootings, we need to start looking at gun laws. And furthermore, on top of the gun laws, we need to stimulate that with good treatment of mental health, behavioral therapy, all these things that we aren't doing. And we think an SRO is going to solve it all. Someone bring me an SRO or even a police officer in general that can detect any signs of depression or, any signs of mental trauma or anything like that. And that goes to show again, kids are there to learn. Kids are there to grow. Kids need to be safe to be able to do that. And so, you think about the SROs, for me specifically, the SRO is a threat and a distraction. I'll say it's a threat because of what it represents, not because I had any problem with the officer, not because of that, but the fear of my safety is a threat to me, And second, it's a distraction. I'm walking down the, hallways. I'm thinking about this chem test. I should be thinking about my nitrogen atoms. I should be thinking about my oxygen particles. Instead, I'm thinking about why is the cop here? Like what is he doing? And that's just a distraction. The same way teachers want us to put our phones away so that we can focus on the material, so that we can dive ourselves to truly learn. They should also want us to do that wherever we are in the school building. And by putting an SRO there and putting a police officer, we can't do that. We're distracted. We will inherently always be distracted as long as the police keeps on showing us time and time again that they will oppress us and that their system, the whole government, will back them up. Things like Breonna Taylor, cops still ain't been arrested. How can I trust that the system's supposed to protect me? And it just goes full circle, and it stems so deep that it's ridiculous to even start talking about. But this is somewhere where we can start. We can dive in right here. We can say SROs out, mental health, behavioral health in, maybe even address gun laws. And I'm not here to say take people's guns away, or give anybody every gun. And to that point, I won't even share a little story. I went to Baltimore, where my schools are located, to get some of my stuff, and I had an easier time, or I had a harder time getting a hotel. I'm 19, credit card, debit card, have a working job. I had a harder time getting into a hotel than I could have had getting a gun. I could get a gun as easy as possible, but I couldn't even find myself somewhere to sleep, even having the money. And that just goes to show how the system is consistently just rigged against. That's all I have to say. And thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and experience, John. I actually wanted, John, can you?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay.
Oh, you want me to?
Next. Okay. So next, I wanted to briefly share my experience as a student of color as well. So I want to quickly start off by giving my testimony as an Asian American student within Worthington. So throughout my childhood, I never knew what it meant to be American, what it meant to feel American, because my eyes, my clothes, and my culture, I was made to feel like an imposter in the very city that I was born in. I didn't really know that I was different at first. I didn't begin to hate the ways that my eyes were too small until other students pinched their eyes up to mimic mine and to ridicule me. I didn't hate how my eyebrows were bushy and how my nose looked ethnic until my peers told me that they made me look like a man. I didn't hate the cultural food that my mom cooked until my peers made fun of it during lunch. I didn't hate that the way my parents spoke unapologetically loud Mandarin in public until I saw the way that people looked at my parents and I with disgust and distaste. I was taught to resent my culture and myself. I remember as a child in elementary school, I used to cry myself to sleep and pray that I would wake up white. That is why, despite always being a shy and reserved child, I eventually learned to find my voice so that I could advocate for myself and others. That is why I am currently an activist, because I don't want any child to have to go through what I and many other students of color have gone through in Worthington. Throughout my years in Worthington, I have reported and brought up numerous cases of discrimination, both towards myself and others, to faculty and staff. They were all let go with no more than a slap on the wrist. I have even been forced to apologize to my bullies and to sympathize with the guilt that they felt harassing me. I have first-handedly seen the lack of action from Worthington to address these incidences of blatant racism and discrimination within our district. It is hard to talk about race in a primarily white neighborhood where most people are perfectly comfortable with their lives. It is hard to talk about race in Worthington. That is why I am so happy to see conversations of anti-racism finally coming to the light. However, conversations are not enough. We need to see action. We need to see a diversified education where history is not just seen through the lens of a white man, where literature, even literature about topics like racism, are not just written by white authors. We need a diverse staff to provide a culturally relevant perspective and to make our students of color feel represented and to better our education as a whole. We need to get SROs out of our schools that are only making our schools more unsafe for students of color. We need to have a policy for no tolerance for discrimination and racism in any forms from students or staff. We need teachers that actually care about what their students, especially students of color, are going through. I ask that everybody in this live stream today truly take these perspectives of these students of color that have spoken today into account to not only emphasize with their experiences, but also understand why they are calling for a change. Thank you for everyone that has taken time out of their day to join this live stream today. Thank you for being a part of the change, but don't let it stop here. Keep the momentum going and keep this movement alive. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for speaking, Melissa, and thank you to everybody who's come to speak so far. Speaking of keeping momentum moving, I'm going to talk about the next steps that we have to take as a community if we want to be successful in our, in our endeavors. We are going to be hosting a virtual protest tomorrow, Sunday, from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. That's a tentative time. It could change. We're going to be holding a Zoom call just to make sure we keep others accountable. That link is going to be posted tomorrow morning. Our main goal is going to be flooding the Board of Education's email inbox with personal testimonies about like SROs, because what they're going to be talking about in their meeting on Monday is the specific topic, SROs. So everybody, I'm going to ask that as many people as possible tomorrow show up to the Zoom call and start sending your emails. Encourage your friends and other peers to show up and start sending in emails. The more people that participate, the better. Additionally, I know that it's kind of difficult to like consolidate like all of our resources. So I'm also going to be putting together a card. I don't know if you guys have seen cards online lately, but they've been popular among like people sharing petitions and GoFundMes and stuff. So I'm going to be putting one together just so we can consolidate links and have a link to the Zoom call, a link to the Board of Education's mail address, and also links to contact us. The deadline to send in the emails will be 12 noon on Monday before their meeting at 7:30. So yeah, thank you guys again so much for coming to the live stream, sorry. And yeah, I'm gonna turn it over to Molly now. So yeah. Also, I just wanted to say that I will be sending out the link to the Zoom call on both the Facebook events and the Eventbrite. So to anyone that received the email for this, it'll be through that same email, it'll be through the Eventbrite. If you didn't sign up for the Eventbrite or the Facebook, I will also be putting it in my social media. But if you are not connected to me on either of those, I would suggest adding me on Facebook at Molly Gladden, MOLLIE, Gladden, GLADDEN, and I will post it on my personal, but you can also send me a chat and I can get you that link for the Zoom call if you are not already connected to the other sources. But thank you guys so much for joining us today. It means a lot that you all came to hear our panelists, hear our student speakers, and also listen to our demands. Again, by no means even if they get the SROs out of the school, the work is never gonna be done. So always keep putting that pressure on.